The Gallant Venture's war room was filled with tension as the crew stared at the tactical map. Cosme Khan's eyes were fixed on the display, while Javier W. remained silent, his lower lip trembling. Felicity Center was biting her nail in frustration, and Maximilian User tried to remain outwardly calm. Gallant Venture, this is a shocking turn of events, Maximilian said, his gaze locked on the map. The Samuel's Glory has sustained heavy damage, yet it still has a surprising number of fighters at its disposal. How is that possible? Cosmere replied agitatedly. We all saw what was chasing their wing. You said so yourself. Maximilian, there was no way they could have survived against such a force. Javier finally found his voice. Are you telling us that a wing was able to contend with and defeat a force 5 times their strength and numbers? That seems preposterous. Reality can be shocking and unbelievable, Javier, Maximilian acknowledged. If you have another explanation, please enlighten us. Javier grumbled, but did not offer an alternative. Cosmere spoke up. It's possible the pilots are Silver Aces, serving under an Aster with Redford Kalin as their leader and commander. That could make it feasible. Maximilian shook his head. Unlikely. Many of the exceptional or talented warriors who distinguish themselves are transferred to the Fifth Fleet, or use their influence to ascend through the ranks. Bronze Aces are already uncommon, and Silver Aces are even rarer. Javier let out a choked, perturbed laugh. You can't possibly suggest that regular pilots were able to not only fight off an overwhelming enemy force, but have nearly 3/4 of them survive the encounter and come out victorious under the leadership of Redford Kalin. I believe it could be a possibility, Cosmere replied, his eyes fixed on the map as it returned to the Samuel's Glory and the cattle ship. If Redford Kalin was the one leading them. Maximilian raised a finger. You forget 2 crucial details. Little Con first. Redford Kalin was sitting on the captain's chair the entire time. Ever since the start of their initial assault up until moments before the jamming ended. There simply wouldn't be time for him to take direct command at any moment. He raised a second finger. Secondly, the jamming effect would prohibit him from doing so, even if he could. Javier asked hurriedly, Then what are you suggesting, User? Maximilian's lips curved into an involuntary smirk. Someone else was acting as the wing leader. Someone skilled enough to not only survive, but achieve victory against such unlikely odds. Someone that read for Kalin, and by extension her bloody majesty Princess Clara Aster, trusts enough to not only lead such an assault, but to throw him into the pits of danger and believe he'll survive and come back. Wyatt Staples, Felicity hissed through clenched teeth. Precisely, Maximilian agreed, his eyes fixed on the map. Felicity's expression hardened. Then, if you are correct, Maximilian, we must eliminate him. We'll be upon them in 3 hours, and within range of our missiles before that. The Samuel's Glory has suffered tremendous damage, and according to their signatures, is running hot. Even if they try to escape the system, their stealth capabilities will be useless, and we'll be able to harass them endlessly outside their effective range. Maximilian's tone dripped with mockery. Your masterful insight and visionary strategic mind are captivating. Felicity glared at him. It matters little, as long as we stay outside their effective range. Even their pulse beam will be worthless. We simply have to target their most damaged areas and keep harassing them. Their missile stockpiles must be severely depleted after such an engagement. Cosmere hummed thoughtfully. It is a viable strategy. The Samuel's glory is wounded, running hot, and their shields were completely drained. It'll take them over a dozen hours to recover a significant percentage, even if they're willing to ignore their heat buildup. Their heat banks and sinks can't handle much more than they are now. They are in quite a precarious position. Javier chuckled. Boarding the ship itself is out of the question, but we can it or destroy it with railgun strikes and constant barrages of missiles. Tragic as that outcome would be, the survivors might just do us a favor and land on the planet, where the lousy rebels and detestable aliens will welcome them with open arms. Maximilian glared at Javier, but before he could open his mouth, they all received an alert from Captain C. My lady, the cattle ship has suffered an internal explosion. Patching feed now. Instantly, the tactical map was updated, and over 1,000 small dots appeared, emerging from the cattle ship and moving directly toward the Samuel's glory. She's dead, Felicity said with gusto, snapping her fingers. One of her maids presented a glass of wine, which Felicity drank from greedily until it was almost empty. Let us wait and enjoy the demise of the Reaper, shall we? Felicity continued. Perhaps the Lord Regent will grant us a title for our accomplishments. Victory over death or Reaper's demise sound rather catching, do they not? As beautiful as you are, Felicity. You can be quite crude and obtuse, Maximilian commented. Felicity chose to ignore his insult. The Reaper and her mongrel knight were able to trick me. This I will admit. But against what is coming for them, I doubt they can repeat such a feat. The odds are not in their favor. By Julius's name, even if all of those are just fighters, they'll overwhelm the Samuel's glory. Cosmia pointed out, there must be bombers among them, perhaps even gunships. I don't see how they can survive against the coming assault. If I were Redford Callan, I would start ordering personnel to board life pods and make their way down to the planet. Even then, I doubt the Drazen will simply allow them to escape after what they've done to them. Maximilian hated to admit it, but he couldn't see any viable way for the Samuel's glory to survive for much longer. To think that the Drazen would be the ones to end the lives of not only Princess Clara Astor, but also the lives of Cynthia Winfield and Redford Callan, leaves a bad taste in my mouth. What was most tragic, however, was his missed chance to face off against Redford Callan in combat and prove himself the superior pilot. Lamenting the loss of likely his only chance to face one of the men who inspired him to become what he is today, he didn't pay attention to the map until Javier's voice brought him back to reality. What are the destroyers doing? Javier asked hurriedly. Cosmia replied, they're changing course, calculating their new vector paths. After a few seconds, he let out a gasp. They're heading on an intercept course against the Gallant Venture. What? Felicity cried out. How is that possible? We're moving in closer, but our stealth system should be able to keep us hidden. Javier protested. We have to veer off. Spineless coward. You'd rather run away before ensuring the Wicked and her followers are dead. Wound-ed honor is not worth losing your life and ours over. Javier continued. I knew you were a coward, Javier, but to such a degree. Felicity sneered. One more word out of your mouth and I shall send you to the brig, Felicity threatened. Javier glared at her and clenched his teeth tightly, but said nothing, choosing instead to leave the room. Maximilian turned to Cosmia. Clever monsters. They must have left behind a probe of their own. Once the jamming ended, they detected our presence and now they're moving to face us. Javier's outburst had been amusing, but Maximilian knew they had to act quickly. I warned you they were likely to do something like this, Felicity. We should have stayed put at the edges of the system, as I suggested. Fortunately, we have time. We can still escape unscathed. But why are they moving to attack us? Javier protested as he left the room. Cosmere replied, they must believe we're here to support the princess. Once their fighters are done eliminating the Samuel's glory, they'll come for us if we don't move to leave now. All eyes turned back to the map, where several small dots emerged from the Samuel's glory's bottom. Are those more fighters? Felicity asked. No, their signature is too small, Casimir answered. By the spirits of my ancestors, those must be mining drones. Mining drones? Javier asked, his panic momentarily forgotten. Why? How do they plan to use mere mining drones? Why are they forming up at the front of the ship? Could they be forming a shield of sorts? A diversion tactic, perhaps? Maximilian offered. There's 200 drones. Cosmere replied, watching the map intently. Even if they use them for ramming, they won't do much, if any, damage to the Drazen. Cosmere's eyes widened as he continued. No, wait. They're dumping them together. The smaller dots combined into several dozen bigger ones, their sensors enhanced by the still active probes, giving the Gallant Venture crew the clearest image of what was happening. They all watched in stunned silence as the Samuel's glory unleashed wave after wave of missiles, depleting even more of their dwindling ammunition. The Drazen responded in kind, though just enough to intercept them before any potential damage could be achieved. A few moments later, the drones began to move as one toward the Drazen formation. What are they planning? Why haven't they begun evacuating procedures? Felicity asked, intrigued. I don't know. I truly don't, Casimir replied, baffled. Maximilian couldn't blame the young Casimir. He too was at a loss for words, unable to imagine what Redford Kalen was planning to achieve. After a tense minute of bated breath, the drones suddenly gained speed. Once they were close enough to the Drazen formation, they drove into its center. Half a minute later, the map was distorted for several seconds, but when it returned to normal, the Drazen forces had been reduced to a few dozen signals, most of which continued to disappear, either destroyed or going silent. No order was needed to be issued, as only a few seconds later, every screen in the war room came to life, showing the borrowed perspective of the Gallant Venture's external cameras, zoomed in as much as possible. The video wasn't the best due to the distance, but it helped reduce the light lag, until, impossibly, before their unbelieving eyes, a tiny, short-lived star appeared on the screen, leaving only an expanding cloud of searing hot plasma particles and radiation. It cannot be, Felicity finally muttered after an eternity of cold silence. She placed a hand on her stomach, suddenly feeling ill. How? That woman is a curse upon her enemies. A curse, Javier exclaimed, his legs trembling. Casimir, Maximilian, explain now. Cosmere was simply shaking his head slowly, unblinking, as disbelief coursed through his body. The lone wolf, unlike his companions, never felt his heart beating as hard as right at that precise moment. It only increased when the fighters moved in after the cloud, created by the explosion, was no longer a danger to them, to deal with the few remaining stragglers. His eyes were then drawn to a dot that was leaving the Samuel's glory, heading for the cattle ship. They're going to board it, he muttered, as disbelief. Surprise, wariness, and excitement filled his beating heart at the same time. Captain Zero, prepare our fleet to engage the destroyers. Felicity cried out, her face showing unbridled rage, contempt, and uncaged fury. After that, we shall destroy their ship and end that murderous Felicity began. But Javier protested loudly. Captaincy, belay that order. Get us out of here. I am your superior. His Lord Regent placed me as the leader of this fleet. My orders are final. Felicity tossed the glass of wine at Javier, who ducked to avoid being hit. Prepare for the engagement. Destroy those ships once we are within range, no matter the cost. The Reaper must die for the glory of the Principality. The Principality, or just yours? Maximilian questioned with a disapproving look, earning a burning glare from Felicity. You understand that you're angry, Felicity. But facing those Drazen and then the Samuel's glory, no matter how exposed they are, won't be easy, Maximilian sighed. They have more than proven that they won't go down without a fight. Maximilian continued, we must leave. Our original mission was fulfilled, even if it was not what you wanted. Where is your pride? Your honor? That heartless viper deceived us, deceived me. We failed the Lord Regent. We must correct our mistake and clean the stain she and her mongrel inflicted upon our honor as nobles and our houses. Such insolence cannot go unpunished. Felicity considered Casimir's warnings, but the moment of clarity was dwarfed and swallowed by the disdain and pure hatred that consumed her heart and mind. We will attack. That is my final order, Felicity declared firmly, leaving no room for interpretation or protest. Maximilian glared at Felicity for several seconds, their eyes locking in an invisible battle, until he closed his eyes and bowed his head in submission. I am bound by contract, duty, and honor to obey House Center. Your command shall be obeyed, Lady Felicity, Maximilian said, raising his head. But let it be known that I disagree with your decision most vehemently. Duly noted, user, Felicity replied. Now go, get our fighters ready. Show our enemies what a lone wolf can do. Turning to Casimir, Felicity continued, come with me, Casimir. I'll need your help crafting a proper surrender demand. Javier glared at Felicity and clenched his teeth tightly, but said nothing, choosing instead to leave the room. As Maximilian walked out, he couldn't hide his smirk anymore. Fate had been kind to him. Perhaps his desire to face Redford Kalen in battle could be fulfilled still. A pleasant thought, if nothing else. Meanwhile, in a different part of the ship, Princess Clara Asta stood before Lord Isdelfinus, the violet-eyed blonde displaying an unfeeling, cold-as-stone expression. Felicity Center and her ilk are present in the system, Clara said. Should they prevail against the Drazen destroyers, and I believe they shall, though at a cost, they are certainly going to strike against us, Istel. They likely seek my death and the destruction of my vessel and everyone in it. Istel rose to his feet, slamming his armored hands on the table. That is an outrage, he yelled, pointing a finger aimlessly. Surely they know I'm on board. They wouldn't dare to put my life at risk and incite the rage of my parents and House Venus. Clara replied calmly. As sad as the reality may be, Lord Is, your life is meaningless to them if it means ending mine in the process. The ramifications of your demise at their hands would be, shall we say, negligible compared to the enormous benefit, status, and accolades mine would bring them. It is worth the price, if I say so myself. Estelle stared at her, anger still evident on his face. Then let me open a communication channel. This is Renter's territory, neutral grounds. Lady Felicity shall listen to reason. Clara giggled softly. My Lord Istel, I'm afraid you're mistaken. This system is a fallen one. We've won the battle, yes. But the planet remains in control of traitors and rebels. Killing you is a political liability they can endure and surely use in their favor. At most, your father, Lord J, will demand retribution to be paid either in blood, resources, or political favors. At worst, Felicity Center will be able to underplay the impact of your demise to the point of irrelevance. Istel stared into her eyes for several moments before asking, would you simply let me